Welcome to the Sideline Report. Washington football team defeats the Pittsburgh Steelers and go win their last 3 games. They've won 3 consecutive games. I'm Marvin Jackson, and with me are Donna Hopkins, Lou Holder, and Lake Lewis. And our special guest today is Brooke Pryor, and she is with ESPN.com. She's a beat writer, and she covers the Pittsburgh Steelers. Brooke, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. And Brooke, want to just say condolences to you all, the Pittsburgh people up there, but we just had to do it. Tell us, the Steelers looked one-dimensional yesterday. 21 yards on the ground. And looked like Washington was pretty much predicting some of those passes. Talk about that team, and is this the same team that was previously undefeated?
Man, this team looked a lot like their 2019 version that I had. I don't know that I would call it the pleasure of watching all year last year, but man, their offense last year and their offense last night and the offense that they've had in the last 2 weeks now against Baltimore and now against Washington has looked very similar as far as being incredibly one-dimensional. The run game has not been able to get going. And part of that is because they're missing Marquise Pouncey, their center. They're also missing their starting running back, James Conner. But even when he was still in there, their offense had just looked like something was off the last couple of weeks. It was not a balanced offense. They'd really been going away from the run a lot more, going to the quick passing game. That's what Ben Roethlisberger likes to do. He was really maximizing his wide receivers and getting the ball out and just spreading it kind of across the board there. And so the thought was kind of like, well, I guess they don't really need a run game if Ben can continue the pattern and the clip that he's on with these receivers. But the last 2 weeks, you really saw that not only were they struggling in the run game, but then the receivers were having drop after drop. They had 7 last night. They had 5 the game before. They lead the league with 31 drops, 10 more than the next closest team. So this is a team where I kind of thought that the Baltimore game would be a wake-up call for them, that they would say, oh my gosh, we almost just lost to a Baltimore team that's missing a ton of guys because of COVID. And then you also understand, okay, well, maybe this was also a bad game because, the game was rescheduled 3 times. They lost Pouncey right before the game. So that was a little bit more excusable. It also felt like it would be a wake-up call, but clearly it wasn't, because they came out against Washington and did the same thing they did against Baltimore. And guess what? When you're playing a team that isn't, their roster completely decimated by COVID, and a hot team like Washington, a team that has a guy like Chase Young that can really cause some problems for the Steelers offense, you're not going to win. And this is a team, they're 11-1. They had a really good start to the season, but it kind of felt like at some point they had been doing just enough to win every week. And at some point that wasn't going to be enough. And that happened this week.
All right. And Lou, Donna, what do you have to say about that game? I mean, one thing I can say is that Washington had 10 days to prepare for the game, and Pittsburgh had 4 days to prepare. Did that make any difference? Or Lou, what do you think about that game?
Well, first of all, welcome, Brooke. We're so happy to have you. I think that there's a tale of two teams. So Washington, it was so great to see that from a culture building standpoint under Ron Rivera. They needed a statement win like that. Obviously, the arch rival for Washington is the Dallas Cowboys, and they swept them. So, but to beat a previously undefeated team was great as far as building the culture that Ron Rivera wanted. So I see that. But I also don't want to get too in the obituary of the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is where most franchises want to be. To the Pittsburgh Steelers level. Only 3 coaches in the history of the franchise, a model of consistency. They are so tactical with their head coach and a quarterback for the ages. It's just interesting to see the dynamics of both cities, and I just thought it was one of those things that both teams came in with a different dynamic. Washington needed that game. Pittsburgh probably needed another wake-up call. So I just saw a great win for Washington and another wake-up call for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But the Steelers are going to be there. They're always there. They're a model of consistency, and they'll always be there.
Lake, you were there. Talk about what you saw while you were there.
I agree with Brooke. I was surprised that the Steeler receivers, I've said this on record, the Pittsburgh's receivers rival Kansas City's. I mean, as far as the best, group in the league. And I was surprisingly shocked to see how many balls that they were dropping. I attributed some of that to them getting hit. I mean, Washington's defense came out and they were laying the wood. I mean, they really were. And I don't know if it surprised Pittsburgh at all. I mean, I'm sure most teams come to Pittsburgh this way, and Brooke knows that better than me. But I just think that maybe they were surprised. I will tell you this, maybe not to Brooke, but to all of us who went up there, it was cold. I mean, it was, I'm a Penn State guy, so I remember those days in college being that cold in central Pennsylvania. But in Pittsburgh, it was really cold last night. And I don't know if that attributed to some of the drop balls and the hits on top of that. But, again, I was just surprised at the lack of energy from Pittsburgh. I mean, for an 11-0 team, there were a lot of guys sitting on those benches, on those heated seats most of the game. I just didn't see a team that looked like they really wanted the game. Washington wanted it more, and they took it in the end.
Donna, you grew up in West Virginia up there in those cold mountains. Did you drop balls in the cold?
Hey, Marvin, you know what? I would have been somewhere trying to find some heat because I hate cold weather. But you know what? Everybody is talking about what Pittsburgh did not do, but they're not looking at what Washington did do. As Morgan Moses said, that they're starting to put some pieces together. I thought that the Washington team was going to get blown out of the game in the beginning because they went down 14-0. But that 3-point field goal at the end of the half, just before halftime, was something to build as this team moved on to the second half. And you saw when Washington came back out, their defense was relentless. But the offense started to put some things together. You lose Antonio Gibson at the beginning of the game, and you're like, oops, what are we going to do right now? But this team found other playmakers. They took Terry McLaurin away, but then Cam Sims has been coming on from week to week, making big plays, the one-handed play. And then, other people made plays in that game. So it's not so much about Pittsburgh and what they did not do, but the Washington football team put their foot on a pedal, and then they continued to get better to make key plays. So I just think that this Washington football team is starting to put pieces together. And it was impressive against a Pittsburgh team that, finally a team that had a winning record. So I like what the Washington football team did in that game.
Brooke, Joe Hayden went down injured, and after that, Washington did move the ball very well and scored twice. Did that make a difference with Hayden being out?
I think it absolutely makes a difference. Joe Hayden's a guy that has played really, really well recently. He had an interception in the last couple of weeks, and he's been there for a lot of balls that have come his way. His numbers are maybe not as impressive as they've been in previous years, but this happened last season where late in the season he got one interception and then it just kind of came in bunches. And it's been kind of that way with his past breakups the last couple of weeks. And when you consider the fact that the Steelers were already down their other starting quarterback in Steve Nelson, he went out, he got injured Wednesday against Baltimore with a knee injury. He was able to finish that game, but he had an MRI afterward, and it was kind of determined, hey, he can't play, especially on a short week. So they were already working with a replacement there in Cam Sutton, who is a very capable replacement. He's played well in place of Mike Hilton other points this season, but now they're having to roll with two new corners in Cam Sutton. I think Justin Lane got some work there. They used Mike Hilton a little bit more, but he is a huge part of that. And not only that, I think Robert Spillane going down in the third quarter was a big problem for the Steelers because he was already replacing Devin Bush. And then they lose Robert Spillane, and now they're having to go to their third option in Avery Williamson, who they traded for just before the deadline. Also a very capable player, but they've been working him in slowly because he's trying to learn the Steelers playbook, and they haven't had a bye week or a lot of time to really get him adjusted to everything going on, especially with COVID and the restrictions that presents. So this is a Steelers defense that is really good, but they are really hurting because of injuries, and that's made it a lot easier for some teams to move the ball down the field.
Brooke, while we have you here, talk about the Steelers' potential as far as being that number one seed in the AFC. That's going to make a big difference, right? And is that something that's very possible?
It is very possible. I mean, right now, even with the loss, they are still in the first place in the AFC. They have the tiebreaker over Kansas City. I believe it's because of their strength of wins or their winning percentage in the division, in the conference. And the Steelers, it does help that they lost to Washington and not, the Browns or the Ravens as far as their standings and tiebreakers. But at this point, yes, mathematically, it is still very possible that the Steelers clinch, not only their first playoff berth since 2017, but also the number one seed, and they get a bye, finally a bye after having their earlier byes rearranged because of COVID. But I think that the way that they're playing in the last 2 weeks, they're not playing like a team that deserves the number one seed. And if they lose one more game, I think that the Chiefs are going to be able to win out and take that number one seed and take that precious bye away from them, and they will have no one to blame but themselves.
I want everybody to talk about this. What team would probably give the Steelers the toughest time in the playoffs?
At first
That's
see, that was going to be my answer. I was going to say, I thought it would be Kansas City, and I thought that matchup would be really good. But you know what? The more players that the Steelers lose on defense, the more I'm not feeling great about it. So I think right now, I said a couple weeks ago that the Browns were going to give the Steelers more trouble in the AFC North than the Ravens. And this was when the Ravens were still winning and hadn't had their COVID scare. And I just got jumped all over on Twitter saying, what are you talking about? The Browns are the Browns. They're not going to do anything. I would be a little bit concerned if I were the Steelers, especially knowing that they have one more date with the Browns coming up and could see them again in the playoffs.
And they're not out of the woods yet, are they?
No.
Yeah, I think Kansas City still, and the Browns, Buffalo, those teams like that, because those teams have good defenses. So, and then Kansas City can beat you so many ways because of the weapons. But Kansas City right now is suffering a little bit defensively, but their offense is almost like the key to their defense that they're lacking there. So I think those teams to me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Kansas City, but I kind of think Cleveland's lurking, not just to make the playoffs. Brooke, I mean, you tell me, Cleveland could possibly still win that division if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Pittsburgh plays Buffalo this weekend. If Pittsburgh were to lose and they still have Cleveland on the schedule, is there a chance that, that Cleveland still has a shot to possibly win the AFC North?
Yeah, it's entirely possible that Cleveland wins. And even Myles Garrett tweeted last night, I think I see a door opening or something along those lines, which I don't know that I would tweet after losing 38-7 earlier in the season to the Steelers team and knowing that the Steelers really don't like Myles Garrett. But it is not impossible for the Browns to win, and they're trending in the right direction. The Steelers are trending in the wrong direction.
Do we throw Tennessee in there at all? Does anybody give Tennessee any type of?
You can't get drubbed at home like that.
I'm looking at New Orleans also. We're talking about switching gears because they're winning without Drew Brees right now. And when he comes back, do you replace him? Do you put Drew Brees back in? Do you leave what they've got in right now? I think that the Saints are the team right now that is not having any hiccups right now.
Brooke, we'd like to thank you for being with us. You've been excellent. You fit right in.
Thanks so much for having me on. This was great.
We got, all our guests have been excellent. You fit right in.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it for taking your time. And the best of luck to the Steelers. Our director is a Steeler fan, so just wanted to let you know. You probably already know that.
I've got my terrible towel right here.
You got your terrible, yes. There it is. Well, thanks so much, and we will talk to you soon, Brooke. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Lou, Donna, and Lake. Don't go away.